Hey, what's going on, guys? This is JacobViral. Haven't made a video in a while. Figured I'd make a video of under the hood for what I got for the 4500s. Pretty much all I have is one Group 6500, which is about the exact same as a Group 31. I think I have 90 amp hours for this battery, and then a 350 amp alternator, JS alternator. So notice that my ring terminals aren't all matched. So I don't care about appearance like some people do. I mean, appearance is nice, but functionality is the exact same. Appearance just makes it look better. And my goal was just to make sure it's hooked up properly and we didn't have any electrical problems. So right now you notice how I have multiple connections where the 0 gauge terminals I could connect and add more. Adding more would be nice, but I don't have the budget for that, as well as it really wouldn't benefit me unless I was to add another amplifier, like extra power, or I was to want to add to my grounds, which I already did on the front end here. I also wanted to explain the big three, really the big four if you consider it. The big four would be doing 2 grounds, one to the engine block, one to the alternator, and then you have your grounds, and then you have your power wire that goes to your alternator. So I'll explain that in detail. So one thing I want to definitely make sure you guys know is 0 gauge. Don't do 4 gauge, don't do 2 gauge, at least 0 gauge. 4/0, 3/0, 2, 1/0. Make sure it's 0 gauge. And it has to be OFC, 100% oxygen free. It doesn't have to be, but I've done non-100% oxygen free, and I noticed a difference in my current between 2.2 and 0.4 volt difference. I wish I would have made a video when I did the changeover, but I didn't. But it did help me pretty much hold up my voltage a little bit better just going OFC. As well as I noticed my wire, sorry there's a truck going by, I'm at the house. I also noticed that my wire was a lot more durable, so it's a lot less corrosion resistant when you have that 100% oxygen free wire as well. Anyway, I'll make another video for comparing OFC and CCA. So here's my setup in general. I have an extra ground going straight to the, I pretty much grounded this off and then grounded this going straight to my ground of my negative, as well as I have another ground over here. I grind it off and then I sprayed it so it wouldn't rust. This is not to the engine frame, but if you have multiple grounds on the side of a sheet plate, it's fine. And then you also have, I have a ground right here that's ran right to the alternator. I would recommend that. That's part of the big four. Big three would be without the ground to the alternator. Straight right on the engine, just the block of the alternator, straight to the ground of my battery. Now I have 2 runs of 0 gauge ran all the way to the positive of my alternator. My OFC 100% oxygen free is rated at 350 amps at 17 foot, so I could have done 1 run, which I did for about 2 months, and then I added a 2nd run to the alternator, and I noticed probably about 20% jump in electrical charge with the alternator going with that 2nd run to the alternator. So if you're able to afford just a little extra wire, go ahead and run 2 runs of 0 gauge to your alternator. I would definitely recommend that, just because even if you have like a 250 amp, you're allowing more current to flow to your alternator. So 2 0 gauge runs to your alternator. That would be part 1 of the big 3. Part 2 of the big 3 would be doing 2 to 3 grounds to somewhere where your grounds already were. So I have stock grounds. These stock grounds are only 8 or 10 gauge. So I ran an additional 0 gauge following from my stock of my vehicle to the ground area. And I did that in 2 locations. 3 if you have the option. And then you also have, that was the big 3, that's part 2. Part 3 of the big 3 is running the ground, your ground, to the engine block. My engine block's way down here. I don't want to go for it, but basically I ran 1 ground to my engine block. I could add another ground to the engine block. I don't know the results. I might do that in the future when I think about it and I have some free time. Another thing you notice, a lot of people don't run fuses, which really in general I would recommend, at least if you're not going to run fuses, at least run fuses to the back of the vehicle, minimum. That way you have a battery fuse separated between your front battery and your rear batteries. That way if you have any issue going to the back, or you need to take away your fuses to run some changes on your back end, then you can do that. So I have 4 0 gauge runs of power going to my back end. I started out with 2 and then I went to 4, and I noticed that 20 to 30% jump in actual electrical change. Because I'm running 6 batteries in the back, 2 wires was not enough. The alternator was clean, charging it well, but I don't think I had enough current flow in order to keep my batteries pretty much without discharging fast enough. Another thing people have asked me is, hey Jacob, why are you running only one alternator? You got over 10,000 watts. You want to go with the second alternator. Yes, that is true. I could spend another $1,000, $1,500 for an extra battery. I mean, not battery, an extra alternator, and the brackets and all that to add an extra alternator. But that's not in my budget. I'm not competing all the time, so there's really no need for me to, do that. As long as I know where my limits are. Excessively, my amperage draw is exceeding what my provided amp hours between my bank storage power is and my alternator charging, because I'm pulling more current than I'm actually providing. So that is over time going to overdraw my batteries in my alternator. But if you know your limits, I'm not full tilting all day. Majority of the time when I'm driving, it's always driving on the highway, or my alternator's got my RPM up, so I'm not sitting there dragging at idle. Anyway, last thing for part 4 for the big 3 is, I'll mention it one more time, you want to have some type of ground for big 4 to make it the 4th part of your 0 gauge going straight to your ground. So you want to ground your alternator going to your ground. Make sure it's 0 gauge. Don't do 2 gauge or 4 gauge. It's better than nothing, but I would definitely recommend just invest in some 0 gauge. So to summarize this, I have a 350 amp alternator. I have 4 runs of 250 amp fuses to the back with 4 runs of power, 0 gauge to the back of my batteries. All my grounds are up front. I have 3 grounds ran to the front end of the chassis to the ground, as well as 1 to the engine block. And that summarizes pretty much everything I have. And my system runs flawlessly, no issues. I full tilt at idle down to 12.3 full tilt on the low end, and when I'm on the highway I could full tilt down to like 12.8, 12.9, and that's like hammering it, almost clipping. And with 12,000 watts clamp power draw on what I have, only 600 amp hours of battery, and a 350 amp alternator, I can say that's pretty good. So anyway, if y'all have any questions regarding the big 3, why do you do it, or what's the purpose behind it, which obviously you would notice it's adding current draw, or y'all have any other questions regarding my system or how to do the big 3 with different vehicles, just let me know. You can find other videos out there as well. But this is JacobViral out. It's just a under the hood video.